Hey friends, you're watching BrainStorm Acres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
Today we're going to be talking about a new piece of equipment for Irene's business.
Major investment.
Big investment.
Been saving the pennies for a while.
But we finally did it. Well, I picked it up yesterday when I went into town. It came in a lot earlier than we expected, which is good and bad because now we have to do something with it because I don't want to let it sit for a large number of weeks because we're going to be going out of town sometime soon for about a week. And when we do, I don't want this thing to be aging. And by aging, I mean running out of time when I can contact the supplier and say there's a problem.
Right.
So,
Stuff. This is actually a piece of plywood with Chinese writing on it. Very cool. Nice looking plywood, actually. That's a keeper.
there's little bits of broken up styrofoam.
Yeah, they used a random collection of styrofoam to pack this, which is fine. I mean, I reuse packaging when I send my things too, but I try and make it look a little nicer. They've got all kinds of stuff in here.
I can use some of this in a project I have.
Yeah, no, I like that kind of stuff because it is really good quality in terms of...
Okay, you want to grab that side?
I'm trying to find a place to grab. There's nothing to grab over here.
I didn't cut down all the way.
Kitchen shears. When knives fail, kitchen shears.
Was there any more plywood in the bottom of that box?
No, but there's a piece of stuff under here. Shrink wrap. It's not real shrink wrap. It's the kind of sticky, wrappy stuff that they sell. We've used that before when we moved to control things. Oh, good. It's got English as well as Chinese. That's a good thing. Because I'm sure it has no instructions.
I actually have a manual that they sent to me.
Oh, cool. That's an excellent thing. Okay, so this comes separate.
You know what we're missing?
What?
The wax pot with the pump.
Well, I don't know if you noticed that there was a box. The box said 2/2 on it.
We got one of two.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we got two of two. There should be another one.
Right.
And this came into the post office.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was shipped by DHL. But we can talk about these pieces here.
Right. Not impressive.
I just seal it back down.
Right.
That's a fairly typical membrane switch panel that you can press down, and it works just like a lot of the switches that we've had on actually consumer products in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not a consumer product. This is actually an industrial product. Now, this piece right here is a clamping system that holds molds that Irene makes. There's pneumatic cylinders here that press this plate down to hold the mold at a specific pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way this machine works is there's a vacuum pump and a pressure pump that pulls the air out of the mold. It clamps it, holds it at a very specific pressure, the amount of pressure on the mold itself.
Mm-hmm.
It holds it for a certain amount of time, and then it injects wax through the wax pot that we don't have yet
Right.
into the mold. And the mold is sitting here with an opening. Let's turn this.
This is the controller box. And it has spaces here for clamp, forward exhaust, regulator, air supply, wax tank, power supply, start switch, connector, power.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of pneumatic tubes that will be coming along with the wax pot. The wax pot. Now you have 2 wax pots down in the studio.
Right, right. And the difference between this machine, other than being more automated, is the fact that it will draw a vacuum on the mold before it injects the wax. The wax pots I have in the studio, I have 2 of them. I bought both of them secondhand. We used to be able to go into Rio and hit their sales like that and pick up stuff. They now put all those kind of sales on their website. They didn't used to do that, but it was more fun in person.
Well, they're pretty much closed now in terms of going in person.
Right.
They closed during the pandemic, and I think they've just decided that it's lower cost for them to run their business in a
I don't know. I was
remote
chatting
fashion.
with one of the old farts who's like me and prefers to talk to people face to face, and he agrees they have to come up with a better solution. So what we decided to do here is we decided that with my old wax pot setup, what you do is you clamp the mold by hand into a clamp, and then you press it with your hands up against the wax ejector, which has a pressurized wax and squirts hot wax into it. And you can set the pressure, you can set the temperature of the wax. I have 2 wax pots because I actually have 2 different kinds of wax.
Because one is good in the summertime here and the other one's good in the wintertime.
Because we're not in a climate-controlled environment. You know, one of the problems is that a lot of your companies will assume that your studio is 72 degrees. Well, my studio probably is 72 degrees at some time in the spring or fall, but most of the time it ranges between 30 and 100, and it could be anywhere in there.
Or a little over 100.
Yeah, and especially when I'm casting. But I try to choose my waxes based on the air temperature, basically, in the room, because if I'm using, for instance, the red wax is great in the winter time because it doesn't get as brittle, and I can fill the molds, I can pop the wax out of the mold, and then I can go use it, getting it set up to actual cast with. If I did that in the summertime, it would be too mushy. It would melt too easy. And the summertime wax, which is blue, it's easy to tell the difference between the color, gets really brittle when it gets cold. I mean, just pick it up and it'll break. This should make it possible to fill molds that are more complex, that I have a high failure rate on. Right now, there are some molds that I'll have to try filling a dozen times to get 1 or 2 decent waxes out of. And I can't get quite the level of definition that I want to out of the mold. The mold is good. It has good details in it, but it's hard for me to get those details in the wax. So we're hoping that switching to this machine, at least part of the time, if not all the time, will make the difference, especially, there are plenty of molds that I make that are easy, that they're 100% practically when you cast them with wax. But there are others that are just about 100% non-successful. So
Yeah,
we're hoping.
Irene's business doesn't just rely on her manual metal forming skills, it also relies on the 30 years of experience that she has in making molds and casting and so on.
Right.
What this unit does is it allows us to establish some specific parameters: the temperature of the wax, the pressure of the wax, the amount of vacuum, how long the wax is going to be applied to the mold, how long the mold has to cool off before it can be released from the machine. So in a lot of ways, this supplants, it doesn't replace her manual skills of doing this specific technical part of the lost wax casting process. But it does make it easier for people like me who don't have 30 years of experience.
Right. Well, so he has to go into town tomorrow to ship an order. So we're hoping that some of the other things that we've ordered will have arrived magically by that time.
Yeah, we're going to have snow coming in again. I'd like to get into town before we have snow. I don't know that's going to happen because it's going to snow tonight.
Right, right. But yeah, it's always a challenge to get things here. But we're hoping and crossing our fingers that the rest of this comes in. Tomorrow would be awesome if it would be there. That would be a really nice thing. That would mean we could have supposedly all of my fabric and yarn and the rest of this so we can start playing with it.
Let's talk a little bit more about this unit right here. This has a computer inside the box.
Right.
That computer has a way to establish all the different parameters that control the pot we don't have, the wax pot we don't have, and these pneumatic cylinders right here. Again, the pneumatic cylinders apply a specific amount of pressure to the plate. This top plate goes up and down. It can be adjusted so that you can have the molds hit the wax pot in the right spot.
Right.
There's an amount of time that the pressure is left applied. There's an amount of time that the wax is applied. There's a hold time. Typical industrial control.
Right.
So hold simply means keep it this way for a certain amount of time. 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, whatever it is. You have that.
And part of that would be a judgment call I would make if I'm using the old-fashioned ones, based on the room temperature and the wax temperature, and how I know the individual molds respond.
So 30 years of experience.
Right.
And part of this is to allow Irene to develop a recipe book for her different molds so that I can help some.
Right.
And as she mentioned before, some of her molds are a little tricky to get the wax in to all the little nooks and crannies and then to be able to pull the wax out. This should help that a lot. Now, this machine that we bought is about 20% the cost of a machine from her favorite jewelry supply company. It's a great machine from that company. But you know, the funny thing is that most of that equipment, even though it is made in Italy, is actually made of component parts that come from China.
Right.
A huge amount of machinery is actually made in China. The only question is
Quality assurance.
exactly. Now,
Because that's the problem we've been through with the generators. That's the quality assurance part. They're not on an expensive piece of jewelry making equipment. Statistically, they are going to be double checking all the important parts. They're going to do run cycles to make sure that everything works. You know, if you've ever watched a how is it made sort of thing, they will check the machinery to make sure it works. And the more expensive the piece of equipment, the more likely that is to have been thoroughly checked out.
yeah. Now I'm pretty sure that these air actuated cylinders here are going to work just like every other air actuated cylinder. They're simple. They're fairly easy to repair if there's an issue. There's a few seals and O-rings in it. There is an electric control that controls parts of this, but it's all done through this machine right here. There are air valves on the back of the box.
Quick disconnect.
Right here.
Yep.
So these things are easy. You pull this plastic piece out, slide the tubing in, and then press the plastic piece back in. And that locks the tube in place. A tube goes over here. There's a tube that goes to the wax pot. There's a tube that comes from the wax pot.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that this little box, well, it's not so little,
It's heavy.
but this box will control all those different functions. A lot of this is really aimed at making it easy for a semi-skilled laborer to fill these wax molds to make the waxes that then get stuck together on a wax tree to be put into one of the flasks that Irene fills up with investing plaster, and then I get up in the middle of the night and start the burnout process where we heat those flasks up so the wax comes out. We fire the investment so that it gets hard, and then that can actually be used to cast the pieces.
Right.
You've seen that in Irene's shows before. We'll do some more of that in the future, especially once we start using this unit. This is, I don't want to say simple, but relatively simple in the grand scheme of industrial controls. So I'm relatively certain, based on the response I got from the manufacturer for a manual on how to operate the equipment, that we'll be able to get reasonable customer service no matter what.
Well, this company does sell through an American corporation in New York. It just so happened that they didn't have the model that we wanted in. Otherwise, we would have bought from New York, simply because the more you're on the American soil, the more recourse you have. But in general, the reputable companies in China are really pushing to meet American standards because we're a huge market for them. You know, we looked actively. I have been looking at these through other sources for years. I have seen them in operation when I did shop tours and stuff like that. And they're pretty amazing. You can get as fancy or as unfancy as you want to. There are some systems that have the ability to read an RFI chip, and that's amazing. You're putting this computer chip into the mold, and you bring your mold up, you stick it in there, the computer in here reads the computer chip on the mold and knows exactly what temperature, pressure, blah, 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 all the parameters that we would normally type in here. It doesn't have to, it just automatically resets everything and does it. And you know, for large corporations that are doing fairly heavy production, man, that makes a difference.
And you know, they also have units that have automated handling, so that it has a robot that pushes the mold in place.
Right.
It comes down and clamps. It does the RFID data dump from the mold, programs the machine, does everything that's necessary to make that mold work.
Then it spits it out.
And spits it out and puts it on a conveyor that goes someplace else.
Right.
No, we didn't buy one like that.
No, we did. We're trying to go somewhere in between, a step up from where I am right now in the shop.
2 steps up.
2 steps up. And large enough, because we could have gotten a smaller activation unit here, but I do a few molds that are larger, and I want to be able to do more of the larger molds. One of the things that has held me back to this point with doing larger molds, I can do the pores, I just can't make the molds fill with wax correctly.
So all we're doing now is waiting for the next piece to come in. I'm going to go.
One of two.
I'm going to go see if I can track where
The next
that
one
unit
is,
is. Since it's probably been handed off to the Postal
Office.
Service, I doubt I'll be able to track it, because that's where a lot of these
black
things go
hole.
apart.
That's a black hole. The USPS is often a black hole.
Well, I hope this provides a little bit of explanation about what's going on with Irene's business when it comes to the technical aspects of her casting portion of the business. All we have to do is track the other piece, find out where it is, find out when it's going to get here, and go get it.
Right.
And then put it together and run it through the test. Now, since I have the user manual for this piece of the equipment,
Right.
we'll be able to go ahead and test that now and see if things are working as they are supposed to.
Right.
We'll be able to tell if the valves are turning on and turning off. We can
Yeah.
do
We
the
need to
timers and so
look and
on.
see if they have temperature information on it. Some equipment doesn't like extra cold temperature or extra hot temperature. So in general, the jewelry type equipment is pretty even tempered, no pun intended, because they know that it will get hot in facilities and stuff like that. But we still need to look at that, because it's something else I'm going to have to pay attention to, because right now I try not to make waxes when it's either super hot or super cold. So if I know, say if I had to make waxes tomorrow, I would heat up the studio good tonight so that everything would develop a more even ambient temperature, and then tomorrow morning I would go in first thing and heat it up again with a wood stove so that it will be a more moderate temperature in there, closer to what you would consider a normal inside temperature. So we'll need to take a look at that and see if it likes temperature variations or not.
Says it's okay. We'll double check the specifications in that
we'll
manual
just check
today.
the specs.
So you know what?
Yeah, time to get going. So be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because obviously we have a lot going on around here.
We're having to wait for another piece.
Yes, but we can meanwhile read the manual and see what likes our temperature and what we're going to need to do and all that other kind of happy stuff. We've already gone through a lot of those details, but it's always nice, as we know from even manufactured in the United States things, the fact that they give you one set of information when you buy it, and then when it comes, sometimes it's not the same.
Say goodbye, Irene.
So until next time, bye.
And don't forget to brainstorm.
Yeah, because obviously we are.